Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we dig in deep to analyze the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. I'm Andy Nelson from thenextreel.com.
And I'm Pete Wright, also from The Next Reel.
Of course, we are still talking about Jon Favreau's 2008 film, Iron Man. And joining us again on the show today, we have Heidi Bennett from the Vibrant Visionaries podcast. Hey, Heidi.
Howdy ho, I am still here.
Another day, another show. Well, today we are digging into minute 18, which starts with a horrifyingly long tube and ends with a horrifyingly placed electromagnet.
Okay, you guys, that tube. God. I don't do well with this.
This is a minute that I describe as a very experiential minute because
yes.
I just feel like I'm in Tony's head like the whole time all of this is happening, and it's just horrifying. This is a horrifying minute. Ugh.
Yeah, I think the sound design, the Foley, everything, especially the sound to me is really plays a huge part in this. But yeah, the visceralness of, at first, when I was watching this with my husband, I was like, oh, this thing that they're pulling out, this tube he's pulling out of his nose looks so realistic. Do you think it's digital or do you think it's real? And we were saying that seems, but then we realized that, it's probably practical, but it's just, you start with it slightly in his nostril and then you turn it to, I'm assuming behind his nose and he's pulling it, kind of like a magic trick. Is that what you guys were thinking?
Yeah, exactly. It's that old trick where you cut to that side shot and you have it probably just coming up a feeder that's just on the side of his face. So it pops out right there looking like it's coming through his nostril. It's a brilliantly composed shot, and it's the sound design.
Yes.
The sound design sells it in all the worst ways.
The thing about it, when you look at the side shot, and if you frame by frame it, they nail it. I mean, whatever you think, however they did it, they nail the part where it actually pulls the tissue of his nose, his nostril, and the upper lip. Like it is, it really looks like they. I don't know, what is the word when you put the thing in the nose like that? Like there's a medical term for that. And you'd think watching enough Grey's Anatomy over the years, I would have heard it. But I can't figure it out. But yeah, I mean, it's just, it really looks like they did it to him. It is an incredibly terrible practical effect. Well done.
Yeah, in the script, they just call it a nasal tube.
A nasal tube. Okay. I
don't know if there's a better medical term for it, but that's how they scripted it.
I'll go with nasal tube. I mean, it makes his eyes water just the right.
It makes my eyes water.
It makes my... it's horrible.
It is one of the worst things in this film to watch over and over and over again.
I really like the lighting in this too. You really get this idea that that there's just this very minimal natural lighting that they're trying to use, just enough to kind of see what the guys are doing here.
It has a nice harshness to it, which I feel works in context of the location, right? It feels like the lights that we're looking at are these practicals, just kind of the little work lights that are set up around the cave. And it gives it a great feel. And just kind of the cold breath and everything really helps. I think actually one of the people had done some research on caves and they were looking at footage of caves in the Middle East where some of these terrorist cells were hiding, and they kept seeing the fog of their breath, and they realized, oh man, we need to make this set cold to really give it that look. And I think it helps sell it so nicely.
Yeah, it reminds me, this particular minute with this lighting and the cold reminds me of John Carpenter's The Thing.
Oh yeah.
There's a good one.
Yep.
The lighting. And then even with we get introduced to his cellmate or his cave mate, and the way that he's shaving, like dry shaving and looking in that mirror, and the mirror's like on this, I guess, load-bearing stump, but that thing almost looks like an organic monster, like a tuber. It's very the thing.
Right. We're at the bottom of a giant carrot is what it is.
Tuber.
The way that they have it wired up, it really does. That's so funny. I'm never going to be able to see it like anything else now.
What you don't know is actually that's what was powering the magnet from this giant potato battery. That's a little known fact. You heard it here first.
Yeah, I think what it is like a stalagmite or like a cave, like a column that they've wrapped in cloth with wire to kind of hold it in place, and then he's used that to kind of hold his mirror in place. But I'm going to go with the tuber now. Every time I watch the movie, I'm just going to think of the giant tuber hanging from the ceiling that they're using for electricity here.
It's perfect. It is just perfect. It actually makes for a really great reveal of the Doctor here as he's shaving. You know, it's a nice sort of mysterious. You feel like looking at him through this grimy mirror, like he is, you know, an antagonist for us, right? That he's going to be a guy we don't end up liking because he's introduced in kind of a scary way, and so it's nice that kind of setting the mood, you know, helping you have to question assumptions about the experience we're about to have here. I think it's just really great.
Well, I just paused it too. Okay, I paused it at second 29, and of course we see the back of his body, the back of his head, but in this second I'm viewing his face in the mirror.
Yeah,
and because of the tuber. And because of the face being a floating head, I think this minute is a horror movie minute. It really feels like a horror movie. And it also, because of the battery and everything, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to, you know, make this connection, but I'm also getting like a, you know, Frankenstein's monster situation here too.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting element to bring up, the fact that this is a doctor, as we come to find out, and that he kind of did this surgery that basically attached a car battery to Tony's chest, as Tony realizes. I mean, and it ends in Tony's horror as he sees what's been done to him. Just like a Frankenstein monster type of person, he rips the bandages off, sees the horror below, and just has that horror look on his face as we come to the end of the minute. It really is an interesting element. And I've never actually thought of this doctor as an antagonistic character watching it. But now in context of this minute and what you've just said, it is really interesting way that they've decided to introduce us to him.
And look at how they use the camera again too, right? Back to that same experience with the camera, you know, that coming back into his body, but now the camera is directly above him as Tony is ripping the gauze, right? And we have the reveal of the ring in his chest, but the camera, it's not that slow push of just that sort of spirit returning to body kind of angle. It's that energetic and nervous push into the gauze, right, as we get him ripping and kind of shredding at his chest to try to see what has happened here.
Yeah, that's a good point. To me, it was like a demented Superman.
Yeah.
You know, because of the reveal, the pulling open of the shirt that could have the S underneath, but instead it's more of a nightmare superhero.
I think that's what DC is doing next, actually, and the S is a giant bloody brand on his chest, and they're really trying to lighten it up, and I feel like that's the way to go.
This is the introduction. We are talking about Sean Taub, I think. I don't know if it's Taub or Taub, but he is playing Dr. Yinsen. And this is a character who was introduced in the very first issue of Iron Man, which was Tales of Suspense number 39, which Don Heck, Stan Lee, and Larry Lieber created this character. He was also a prisoner of Wong Chu, although, and this is interesting, and I think it works well in what we're talking about here. In the comic, Tony is actually imprisoned first, all by himself. And then Wong Chu and his men bring Yinsen in and throw him into the cell with Tony on day 2 as somebody who can help Tony. And in that context of an introduction, it creates a much more protagonistic, friendly character right out of the gate. And I so much more prefer what they've done in the film by giving you that sense of doubt. Like, who is this guy and what has he done to Tony?
Totally agree. I think that was absolutely the right choice here. Again, because we're following on that sort of suspenseful, that horrific mood. We have to carry that mood a little bit longer so that we can watch Tony adjust. And in coming minutes that, who knows? We just hope he does.
This is a bit from the comic book. This is the introduction to Yinsen. It's rough. It was really rough, the dialogue that they had for these Vietnamese characters. This old one, Professor Yinsen, once great scientist, now lowly manservant of Wang Chu, will help you build weapon.
Yeah.
Those were the days, I guess.
Oh, man.
Okay.
But he was, in fact, Tony says to him, Professor Yinsen, in college I read your books. You are the greatest physicist of all. Then everyone thought you had died. And Yinsen said, I'd have been better off if I had. I was pressed into slave labor by the Reds, and when I resisted, Wang Chu took me prisoner. I like that Yinsen doesn't speak that way. And I like that this is a guy who is a professor and, as Tony says, was the greatest physicist of all. So it is somebody who really knows his stuff. And I think that is a great element that they've kept in this film, despite the mystery that we just don't know anything about him right now. And we haven't seen any of these other minutes coming up, so we just don't know.
I know. Who knows how it's going to... I do love that we've moved on from this, from accents being a marker of intelligence, right? That the minions have accents, but the educated ones don't. Like, we don't have to deal with that in this movie,
Definitely.
at least.
Just as a note, we should mention, we were talking about the sound earlier. The sound designer of the film and the re-recording mixer was Christopher Boyes. I thought this would be a fun way to, when we talk about these different people on IMDb, you guys can tell me if I'm crazy or not, but to look at, the game, the IMDb game.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So the 4 movies that Christopher Boyes is most known for on IMDb are Avatar, King Kong, the Peter Jackson one, Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, and Iron Man. So this one did end up in the top 4 for his.
And rightfully so, for the nose sound alone.
For that alone.
Yeah.
And cinematography, we've mentioned it before. Matthew Libatique is the cinematographer on this, and his 4 films, which I think speaks quite largely to the fact that Darren Aronofsky is a regular collaborator of his. Black Swan, Requiem for a Dream, Pi, and The Fountain are the films that he's most known for.
Well,
not Iron Man.
But that gives that dark moodiness of this minute that connects for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Anything else in this minute, you guys?
For me, the other thing that I noticed, besides the visceral uncomfortableness of watching him pull that tube out of his snout, is that when he rolls over and to grab a cup and the water, and then when he realizes that he's connected to the battery, that's another one that I winced every time that he yanked over. I was like, oh. Ow, ow.
Yeah, don't care for it.
And that has a great sound design with it too, when he realizes the sound, when that ambient music kicks in, when he realizes that he's attached to that car battery. It works so brilliantly in its creepiness.
Yeah, and the thing that I'll say is I really concentrated on the sound of this particular minute and the effectiveness of it. And now watching it on mute as I chat with you guys, that's when the horror element really came in for me too. So that's something I think that people who are following along here and joining us on this journey is, as I always like to suggest, watch these films on the best screen with the best sound you can. And then also, if you have headphones and can listen that way, all the better, And then thirdly, check things out without sound and just see what you observe, see what's different without it. There's my recommendation.
That's a great point. I mean, it is a medium that people call it a visual storytelling medium, but I think the oral, kind of the audio side of it is so critical. And when you mix all of it together, you really create just an amazing world that can sell things so wonderfully or horrifically in the case of this particular minute. Another thing, and as you were talking about the car battery in that moment, it did make me realize that another thing that I think works really well is I think that I've had this built-in fear of car batteries, probably because, when my dad was first showing me I was learning about cars and car batteries and how to jump a car with a dead battery and all that stuff. And you get the stories about, now don't ever touch these at the same time, or, it'll throw you back. The electrical shock will be so intense, and all these horror stories of car batteries. And now it always goes through my head when I'm like getting the different things on a car battery to jumpstart it. And it's just instinctive terror now, just anytime I'm dealing with car batteries. So I can only imagine the horror of seeing one attached to a thing in my chest.
Yeah, right. It's one of those, like, I'm the thing I fear the most is the two wires like touching each other. And
right.
I don't know what would happen. I just
Exactly.
have an image that it would be bad.
Totally.
Don't cross the streams. Don't cross the wires. There are a lot of things not to cross.
I mentioned Sean Taub, and I didn't. I looked up a little bit about him too. I suppose we should talk about that before we move forward. He is born in Iran to a Persian Jewish family, and then he was raised in England and Switzerland before moving to the U.S. And he was a very busy actor, working since the late 80s. He's got 96 credits on IMDb, including, and I didn't know this was happening, a new Snowpiercer TV series.
Oh,
which
right.
is exciting to hear.
Is that upcoming? It seems like I heard about it.
I thought it was out. I thought it had already been released.
It's entirely possible. I just didn't even know they were doing it. So I think that is super exciting. It says, when I look at it on IMDb, it just says filming.
Interesting.
Interestingly, his IMDb top 4, he only has 3 with 96 credits. He only has 3 that are listed in his top 4. And those are Iron Man, of course, Crash, and The Kite Runner. So he's been in some pretty big films.
The Kite Runner. That's right. It looks like it's slated season 1, episode 1 for sometime in 2019. Snowpiercer, the TV show, if you're keeping up.
Yeah, I was just watching, I don't know if you guys caught this on Twitter, because I listened to Everlasting Minute. That's the Willy Wonka podcast. And
right.
They had reposted a tweet that a video somebody had made saying that they have this theory that Snowpiercer was the sequel to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And they had all these really interesting connections. So when I watched that, I was like, I get what you're saying. So I was just thinking about that because of that. It was interesting.
Wow.
I have a hard time connecting that in my head. So
definitely,
check
it out. He does that side by side comparison kind of thing, and talks about the different characters and the different motivations of the films, and I was convinced.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining us, Heidi.
Yeah.
Glad to have you along for another episode. Where can people find you if they want to track more of the projects down that you're working on?
Yeah, check out Vibrant Visionaries for my current podcast. So we're recording in October, and I just got back from Fantastic Fest, and I interviewed several directors, and I even interviewed Sam Jones, aka Flash Gordon, and really had a blast. So you can find all sorts of cool interviews, including several film directors and some other interesting people that I met up with at Fantastic Fest.
I'm so jealous that you got to go there. I've heard nothing but amazing things about that festival. So one of these days, I have every intention of being a part of it.
I definitely think you should. As a film lover, it's absolutely a film lover's dream of a place, because they absolutely make sure that every phone is silenced. Nobody can speak in the theaters or you will be ejected from them. And simultaneously, you also get to eat delicious food or partake in some tasty drinks if you'd like as well. So and then you get great sound, great, wonderful Alamo Draft House, seating and sound and screen. So it's just really a film lover's paradise.
Sounds like
so
fun.
great.
All right, everybody. Well, that is it for today's show. Thank you again for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the show for free at marvelmovieminute.com. Join us over in our Discord chat room and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Next Reel. And if you like what we do and you want to support us and get some cool stuff, become a patron over at patreon.com/thenextreel. Until next time, true believers.